Welcome back to Chit Chat History. Today we will be taking a quick dive into the past to discuss some of the traditions at British royal coronations. So picture this, you've just been assigned as head of the Coronation Committee in charge of organising the coronation event. What do you need to know and where on earth do you start? Let's start with what a coronation is and why is it important. A coronation is the formal investiture of a monarch with their regal powers, but that did not mean a king or queen could not be the king or queen until they were formally crowned at a coronation. A monarch ascends to the throne at the point their predecessor dies, or in some cases when they simply claim themselves to be the next monarch. The coronation then follows sometime later when it would be arranged. It will typically take several months to plan such an event. In fact, based on the track record, it seems about a year was average. However, some monarchs never even got to the planning stage and never had a coronation. Sven Forkbeard, who reigned only 5 weeks, Edward V, who was imprisoned in the Tower and later suspiciously disappeared, Lady Jane Grey, who was imprisoned in the Tower and then killed, and Edward VIII, who abdicated before his coronation. Now let's set the scene. What happens at a coronation? Coronations have predominantly followed strict tradition and ceremony. Not much is known about coronations of Anglo-Saxon kings before the Norman conquest. We do know that they had the king's stone they would sit upon, and they modelled their ceremony from a mixture of Frankish traditions and ordination of bishops. However, it was primarily a simpler version of what we still see happening today. Things have become a little more regimented, and since the late 14th century, the ceremony followed the same order of service. Now luckily for us, if we were organising it, we actually have a manual. This is the Liber Regalis, meaning royal book, a Latin manuscript created in 1382, that describes exactly how to organise a royal coronation. We don't know who this manuscript was made for, but we know it was created before the coronation of King Richard II, and perhaps it literally was meant to just be a handy manual for whoever was stuck with the job of organising the next one. Anyone reading this manuscript in 1382 may recognise all of the components of the coronation of King Charles III in 2023, although one major difference being that it would be performed in English, rather than entirely in Latin. It was in 1559 for Elizabeth I's coronation, English was first used with a mix of Latin, and for the very next coronation in 1603 for James I, the Latin was phased out. And obviously, a major difference is what we are crowning the person. What once was King of Wessex became King of England in 925 with Athelstan. This became King of England, Denmark and Norway with Canute the Great in 1017, and then swiftly back to just of England, and became King of England, Ireland and Scotland with the accession of James I in 1603, Queen of Great Britain and Ireland in 1707 under Queen Anne's reign, and finally King of the United Kingdom in 1801 with George III. The Liber Regalis lays out the main stages of the coronation: the recognition, where the monarch is presented to the people, the oath in which the monarch makes promises to their subjects and God, the anointing, where they are blessed with holy oil, the investing, in which they receive the royal regalia, including the ceremonial sword and sceptre, the crowning, and the homage, where the other important senior peers swear their own oaths to the new monarch. To the people watching a coronation, typically we may consider the crowning to be the big moment, but actually at its heart, this ceremony is a religious one. It is the anointing that is the pivotal moment for the Catholic Church, as this is where the monarch is blessed by God. In fact, this is so special, it is done under a canopy for the sacred moment to be as private as possible. Now, who should we invite to host? One person most important to invite is the Archbishop of Canterbury, who performs the ceremony of the coronation. Since 871, about 49 coronations out of 55 that we have record of were presided over by the Archbishop of Canterbury, so it's a pretty big part of the job. If they were not available, or find themselves bound by oath to support the usurped monarch such as James II, or other such reasons, then so be it. We can instead invite a trusted bishop of London or Winchester to step in. Now what about the items featured in the coronation? The coronation features the royal regalia. Similar royal regalia has been used since the time of Edward the Confessor in 1050. However, during the Civil War in 1649, the royal regalia was melted down and sold off. That is, all but one. The coronation spoon survived the melting simply as it was one item that was not deemed as important, or simply that nobody knew what it was. The yeoman of the wardrobe bought the spoon when it was being sold off and kept it safe, giving it back to the royal family as a gift to Charles II after his restoration. This spoon therefore is the oldest surviving piece of regalia in the coronation, dating back to the 12th century, possibly to Henry II or Richard I's time. It is used in the anointment ceremony as a spiritual item, used to pour the oil which is then used to bless the monarch. Next up, perhaps the most important item, a specific crown is used in the coronation, and one that won't be used or worn again until the next coronation. This is St. Edward's crown, created in 1661 for Charles II, as a replacement of the earlier coronation crown, which was destroyed. The original was made for Edward the Confessor, hence its name St. Edward's crown, and the name carried on. It weighs 4 pounds 12 ounces of solid gold, and incorporates 444 precious stones. It also features the fleur-de-lis, noting English claims over France, and orbs and crosses representing the Christian faith. And yes, it is only ever used to crown the monarch, probably worn at most in any monarch's reign for about an hour during the rest of the ceremony. But they don't walk out with the same crown. A different one, the imperial state crown, is worn on the return procession back to Buckingham Palace, containing 4 pearls thought to have belonged to Queen Elizabeth I as earrings. The orb was also remade in 1661. It is a globe of gold surrounded by a cross, band of diamonds, emeralds, rubies, sapphires, pearls, and an amethyst in the middle. There is also a coronation ring called the Wedding Ring of England, made in 1831 for William IV, and placed on the monarch's hand at the 6 coronations since then. That is except for Queen Victoria, whose fingers were too small for the ring. In fact, they made a replacement for her, which then ironically was made too small and had to be forced onto her hand during the ceremony. Another vital piece for the coronation is a throne fit for a king. St. Edward's coronation chair has been a centrepiece in royal coronations for over 700 years. It was created in 1301 by Edward I, and it is a symbol of monarchy. Funnily, it was even used by Oliver Cromwell when he became Lord Protector. Though he melted down and sold off all the gold from the regalia, he still wanted to keep the fancy chair to sit in. An extra chair was also created for Mary I when her and her husband William III were crowned together. This chair was built to also contain the Stone of Scone, or the Stone of Destiny, another integral part of the ceremony. The stone has its own great history tied to Scottish monarchs and Scottish coronations. However, it was stolen by Edward I as part of his spoils of war. The stone remained permanently part of the coronation chair until 1996. This is apart from a brief 4-month stint in which it was stolen by Scottish students in 1950, said to be a statement of Scottish independence. It was formally returned to Scotland in 1996 and remains on display in Edinburgh Castle, with the understanding that it could be borrowed for future coronations. And what about the venue? Westminster Abbey has been the venue of every coronation since 1066. That's over 950 years. That's 38 coronations in total. Before then, it would be wherever it was convenient to do. The original abbey was built in 1050 by Edward the Confessor, not specifically for coronations. Edward's brother-in-law, Harold Godwinson, was crowned after him, and it is thought that he may have been the first king to be crowned at Westminster Abbey, quite hastily the day after Edward's death. However, we don't have actual evidence that supports this theory. It would be 11 months later, on Christmas Day of 1066, that William the Conqueror was crowned king. William was a Norman invader and chose to have his coronation at the new abbey to legitimise himself in this new place. From that day, every monarch continued to use the same setting for their own coronation. The current Westminster Abbey is a new building that was rebuilt by Henry III in 1245, this time adding a specific spot purpose-built for coronations to occur. The first king to be crowned there was Edward I in 1274. Now we have the venue, the objects and the ceremony, but what about the atmosphere? The music plays an integral part too. In fact, the song sung at the king's coronation may be the longest tradition to span past the Civil War, past the Norman conquest, and just 100 years short of Alfred and Athelstan themselves. It was in 973, at the coronation of King Edgar, that apparently the story of Zadok the priest was told. This was a biblical account of the anointing of King Solomon by a priest, so a strong connection to what happens at the coronation. It was later turned into a song at the coronation of King Charles I, and another for King Charles II. This same text was then later used in a composition by Handel in 1727 for George II's coronation as a coronation anthem, and has been used ever since. That's 51 coronations that these words have been retold. You might recognise it as the Champions League song. It became a very patriotic song, tied with the monarchy, more so than the anthem. In fact, even the singing of the national anthem at coronations was only recently introduced in 1953 at Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. Something else we should know before planning the coronation is who will be crowned. It may not just be a new king or queen, but could be both. A king's wife has often joined them at the coronation in being crowned queen consort, which just means that she is married to the king. And if the king marries after his own coronation, a new queen consort may get her own special coronation of her own. The first joint coronation was for Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine in 1154. 17 have occurred in total, including when William III and Mary II were crowned as joint rulers. The rules are a little different for queen regnants, which means she is queen in her own right. With Anne Victoria and Elizabeth II, they never shared their coronation with their husbands, as the queen's consort does not share their title and become a king. So there we have it, some staples that we simply cannot forget when organising a British royal coronation. We need to book Westminster Abbey, make sure the Archbishop of Canterbury is free, we've got our regalia ready and polished, we need to sign the release form for the Stone of Scone, and get the choir practising Zadok the priest, and I'm sure thousands of other little things. For now, I hope that quick and easy blueprint can help get you started. Thanks for watching this far, I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.